Please join us as we explore the range of possibilities within the pivot today. This is our series looking at how exploring the range of possibilities of a certain element can help inform us on the possibilities of that element, help open up creativity, as well as educate us on how we can make that element beautiful on any range of the possibilities, not just our own particular sweet spot.
If you are registered for the free gameoftango.com, and section 5 and in section 10, you will find exercises specific to pivots. Now, the ranges that we're going to be looking at in this video are the amount of pivot, how much rotation there is, the speed, and geometry. And of course, we'll see that each of those are linked to the others.
And before we get into it, if you would take a moment to like and subscribe this video and share it with other tango enthusiasts, that helps support free tango online. Okay, Arjun, let's take a look at the pivot. We're gonna start on the very, very small end of our amount of turn range, and we're gonna work all the way up from tiny little micro pivots all the way to our calecitas, which is more than 360 going around. So we're gonna explore the full range, starting off with our tiny little micro pivots. How do we use micro pivots?
When we turn a corner, we make little swivels with a foot, a little pivot with a foot to accommodate the turn. When we're going around the room, line of dance, even at the corners, we're making little pivots. We can also tighten up that turn. Let's say we're blocked, we can't proceed down the line of dance. We can even make a turn in place.
And what we can do going one direction, we also can explore going the opposite direction.
Person on the outside is going to be a geometry element, is using that outside step to contain the circle that we're forming.
What this also does with utilizing these micro pivots is this allows us to send our toe in the direction that we want to go and then readjust as we get there. So this can also prevent the sickling of the foot as you're walking. We always want to avoid turning the toes in. If you're thinking, I want to go that way, we don't turn the toe to go that direction. Yeah, we don't like that. Not a very pretty look. What we can do is take the step forward and then use that micro pivot to keep our feet underneath us and stable instead of turning in, making things wobbly.
Right, not only for aesthetics, but functionally, that it's good for our joints to have our turnout.
Yes, exactly. So we encourage you to take a look at the usefulness of the micro pivot, not just for navigating the entire La Ronda, but also take a look at those tiny little walks in a circle. And you know us, we like to try things all over the range. So make sure that you are trying that counterclockwise, clockwise, with the leader going around the outside as well as the follower going around the outside. The last thing I would like for you guys at home to be thinking about is what actually leads this little micro pivot. What is it that's going to encourage your partner to get onto that foot and then actually pivot? Any ideas? Upper body, right? It is the lead through the chest, that rotation, that spiraling motion. Some like to call it dissociation, some like to call it the internal twist. But just remember, as soon as we get onto the movement, it's this actually heading to the next direction that would encourage your partner to make that little pivot on their foot.
Nice.
Yes.
Let's look at ochos. That's a figure that involves a pivot to one direction and then a pivot to the other direction. You may have heard of something called milonguero ochos, which is actually a form that's done with almost no pivot by simply keeping ourselves flat. Just to be aware of what that looks like, if we may. So the follower is simply crossing the leg back at the hip and not really having to do any significant pivots. But what we're talking about here is using our pivots or spirals.
So again, on our small end of the amount of rotation, we have little 45-degree back ochos that are traveling, and that's usually what causes them to be nice and small and short, is the fact that we're still wanting to travel down the line of dance as we do these. So as you can see, we can do these traveling down the line of dance. This can also become circular, which would then go more into our circular walk type of ochos. But we're just feeling a small, short rotation or internal spiral as we head into each of those steps.
Yeah. And as Tina pointed out before, we're using that spiral in the body. It may not have been very visually apparent, but Tina was feeling the spiral pressure to prompt those pivots.
Yes. And on all of these smaller range ochos, the tone in the embrace is staying nice and calm, relaxed. We are not trying to use the tone in our frame to indicate a change in anything. These pivots are happening within the movement itself.
So we should probably show those going in the other direction.
Sounds good. Yep. This is a nice switch up too, because so often the ochos are always done with the follower going backwards and the leader going forward, right? So we encourage you to turn the situation around, like always, and explore what does it feel like to have the follower doing small little ochos heading into the leader as they work backwards.
Oh, I enjoy that, giving my partner a break and not having to be going backward all the time. It is important, followers, you'll want to have your eyes open at that time so that you can make sure we're not going to be backing into anything.
Exactly. We are now the eyes like the leader usually is. So if your leader is beginning to back into somebody, I always give a little extra pressure on the back of the frame so they know that somebody's back there.
So we've just demonstrated a 45-degree pivot. Let's go a little further. Add another 45 degrees for a 90-degree pivot, a right angle pivot. And that's sometimes called el gato, the cat. And we've done a previous video on that, el gato, where we do a pivot and a weight change in place.
So those are basically a whole series of little el gatos. So first we're going to explore that 90-degree pivot going linearly down the line of dance. We're going to do forward ochos first. And we can also take this circular around the leader, both to the hand side as well as to the arm side. A little bit different going to that arm side. That's less common, if you will, but also a great reason to explore that even more and get that comfortable.
Exactly. And we can also do that backwards or with an outside pivot. Linear, and then circling. And either direction.
Fun. It's important to notice that we have definitely dialed up the tone in the frame with these traveling ochos, these little ochitos or el gatos.
Right, because at the pivot point, we want to contain our partner to indicate this is where something different is happening. We're not going to continue that movement across the floor.
And we encourage you to play with the speed of these. These can be really fun done both slowly, nice and elegantly, something to accentuate what is going on. Boom. And also just as fun, we can do these rather quickly to increase the drama going on there. So like we have talked about in the past, when we have an increase of speed, we also want an increase of tone. So within that increase of tone, there might be less for nice and slow, easygoing ones, but especially for those faster ones, we want a nice solid frame so that way we can work the energy within the frame instead of letting it kind of flow through the frame. Alrighty, let's get into what most people think of when they hear ochos or the pivots, right? They're thinking of these 180-degree movements. So let's take a look at a very common entrance into our basic forward ochos. We like to get here from the cruzada.
And since our partner's already wound up, let's unwind it. And you can see the figure that the feet form on the floor is that figure 8 or ocho.
Okay, basic forward ochos. We're going to assume that you guys are all very comfortable with those if you are here with us today. Let's get into the exciting stuff, because that's what we're about, right? Is exploring that full range of what can happen with this movement. By playing with the geometry first, we can take this movement that is going down the leader's arm side and we can send it all over the place. First thing that we can do everywhere, we're going everywhere with the ochos. First thing that we can do is we can take a look at that leader walking backwards while the follower is doing forward ochos. We did them as ochitos before, but we can also do them as full forward ochos as well. So if you notice, as Arjun moves around, this is a circular in the spot movement. He's moving with and around, right?
And by the way, if I step across my partner's path, I can create a nice opportunity for a follower cicada.
Yes.
Just a little bonus.
Yes. Playing again with the geometry that we are creating as well. It's not as easy to do the forward ochos with the leaders walking forward, but we can certainly explore that idea as well. So this one definitely requires more of an overturn if we are going to actually travel down the line of dance. And again, a little bit trickier. That is something that definitely takes paying attention to. Has my partner actually completed that movement, come around that corner before we can take off right there.
And so much of, we also want to be careful about all the dancers around us. So much of tango is not only dancing with our partner and with the music, but with the others in la ronda, the circle around the floor. Being able to control our angle of pivot will give us navigation abilities. We can aim ourselves wherever there is space, where we can stay within our lane and not be impeding other dancers.
Exactly. We can also take these forward ochos and explore a little bit more in place, because that's typically what they are used for. Our back ochos are usually used to travel. Our forward ochos are usually used in some kind of in the spot movement. So if you notice right off our basic forward ochos, we are in what they call cross system, because we have to change the footwork to get onto the follower's footwork. So both Arjun and I are stepping with this outside foot. That's our cross system. So these are our basic. The leader is moving in the direction or with that step on the ocho. But we can also go in opposition. Arjun can stay there and send me into that ocho, and then go opposite. I basically head exactly where I just came from. So we also can have a look of opposition there.
And it adds a nice dynamic feel because whenever we're moving in opposite directions and yet we're staying with each other, it adds energy to that rotation.
So the leader can go with the follower as they're doing the ochos. The leader can go in opposition. The leader also has plenty of opportunities for embellishments within their own footwork as the follower is doing forward ochos, additional weight changes, la pieces, things of that nature. And then to give the ultimate, we can also have the leader ocho with the followers ocho. This requires a lot of frame adjustment, as you may be noticing. We'll do towards the camera. We're quite close, but then the frame has to expand as we move away. So don't keep a nice, tight, rigid frame and try to create these. They don't work very well. The frame definitely has to breathe and expand and contract as we are creating these. And as usual, we can play with the timing of all of these movements. We will let you explore that at home, but we encourage you to try all of those different forward ochos very, very slowly, all the way up to as quick as you and your partner can manage it to the music. And as usual, when we are increasing speed, we also want to increase the tone to help create that energy within the partnership.
Righto. Let's look at back ochos. It's a bit more demanding for the follower, more work, and we'll give you some ideas about how to make that easier.
Yes.
So let's say that our line of dance is this way, going towards the camera. Now, oftentimes we're taught that we'll start a back ocho with a side step and the leader changes weight so that I can then step in cross system with my partner. A couple of things to note right off the bat. If I start off facing down the line of dance and I take a step sideways, I'm stepping into someone else's lane. So we would like to either be directly sideways to the line of dance or at a 45-degree angle so that we stay in our lane. Thusly.
Thusly. So, most commonly, back ochos are used as a traveling step, as opposed to forward ochos that are most commonly used as a on-the-spot type of movement. However, that does not always mean that it has to be that way.
Right. If we're using 180s to travel, we're asking a lot of work from our partner.
And we won't be traveling very far because inherently a 180 should keep us right where we are, right? So it doesn't work very well to do full 180s, but we can travel them just like we demonstrated. We like to actually use a singular back pivot to redirect into another direction as opposed to multiple back ochos. So that might look something a little bit like this. Which is a really lovely movement. By pulling that singular pivot out and using it just to reframe or recreate a new line of dance, that is really lovely. But not to say that we can't do our back ochos as an in-spot movement, because sometimes you're in the middle of a traveling back ocho and boop, somebody in front of you just decides to stop. And maybe you don't have time to redirect that and we need to just change it to an on-the-spot movement. A couple of tricks to make that movement feel better. One that we really like is to actually have the leader join the follower in the ochos as they are doing them. because that actually makes it feel like there is just something going on right there. And by the rotation of both the leader's upper body as well as the hips, it allows us to stay a lot more connected, as opposed to if Arjun wasn't doing those along with me and was just kind of going side to side. I feel like now all of it is on me. And if you don't have a lot of if you don't have a lot of flexibility right here to maintain this, this can be a very uncomfortable position. And we usually see a lot of breaking of the frame, breaking of the center lights, things like that. So we like to add the leader's pivot on because we feel like that geometry feels really nice and lovely.
Something to be aware of, however, for you leaders, it is more challenging because you're pivoting as well. So your balance, it requires greater balance and grounding from both partners if we're both doing that pivot at the same time.
And this is a great example as to why exploring the entire range of a movement can actually make you a better dancer, because you get into these not so common, not so comfortable movements. And if you really sit in them and work on them and figure out how can I make this comfortable, that is just expounding upon your knowledge of the dance. The other thing that we would like to point out to followers to help make back ochos more powerful and feel more comfortable is the utilization of the arm side of your frame. I'm gonna have Arjun turn around. Yep. So, normal, right? Closed position, we've got lots of different places. But as we expand into the back ochos, I'm gonna actually lower my frame and expand, and I'm gonna use the shoulder blade area or the side of the leader's body to help power. Look at that. See? I can push right off of Arjun and create a lot of energy with very little having to come from him. But it is a way that if you are needing to gather more energy for your back ocho, maybe you're not getting enough rotation from your leader or enough energy, you can then create that within your own body by using the arm side to help your internal twist happen.
A couple of additional helpers for both partners. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes we might feel the back ocho stall out here. We don't have this lever to give our partner that easy pivot. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of things that we can do. First of all, for the follower, if I'm taking this back pivot, but I don't get all the way on my axis, it's going to be hard for me to get turned around. So we want to push and get fully onto our axis.
Yes.
For the person that is leading the movement, mm-hmm. if I don't step far enough, if I don't frame my partner's heavy leg, the leg that they're standing on, then I am at a disadvantageous position to give that signal mm-hmm. for the rotation. Mm-hmm. If, however, I overstep or outstep my partner, then
so much
I've
easier.
I've got the leverage.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful points.
A range of possibilities for pivots. We've gotten all the way from 0 up to 180.
There you go.
In this part 1. There's more to come in part 2.
This is the really exciting stuff because we're going to get into 270, 360 degrees, and beyond. So make sure that you click on through to part 2, and we will see you then.
Until then, abrazos.